got over 80 countries now, and China being one of them, that are in talks, that are ready to make a deal.
By quietly whitelisting select U.S. goods from its crushing 125% duties, is China easing tensions or setting the stage for a fiercer trade showdown? Chinese officials have privately informed certain companies, especially those that rely heavily on American technology, that some U.S.-made items like medicines, computer chips, aircraft engines, and a fuel called ethane won't face the high taxes. This behind-the-scenes action is China's way of protecting key parts of its economy, without publicly appearing to back down from the tough stance it has taken against the U.S. By offering selective relief, China is trying to ease the pressure on businesses that depend on American imports, while still presenting a strong image in the ongoing trade dispute. The current trade clash between the U.S. and China began in early 2025, when the Trump administration started rolling out a wave of new tariffs on Chinese products. On February 1st, President Trump signed orders placing a 10% tax on Chinese imports, saying it was mainly aimed at cracking down on chemicals used to make fentanyl. At the same time, he also imposed 25% tariffs on goods from Mexico and Canada. Later in March, the U.S. expanded these measures by applying new tariffs, ranging from 11% to 50%, on several of its global trading partners. Chinese products were hit especially hard, with their tariffs rising to 34% and eventually reaching a massive 145% by early April. This sharp increase was part of what President Trump called Liberation Day, describing it as a key move to pressure China into making a better trade deal. China responded quickly and forcefully to the U.S. tariffs. On April 4th, it announced an extra 34% tax on all American goods, adding to earlier tariffs of 10 to 15% that had already been placed on U.S. farm and energy products earlier in the year. Just a week later, on April 11th, China raised its tariffs even higher, setting a flat 125% rate on all imports from the U.S. Chinese officials mocked President Trump's strategy, calling it a joke, and declared they would not respond to any further tariff hikes. At the same time, China also placed restrictions on exports of rare earth elements, materials crucial for technology and defense, showing it was willing to go beyond tariffs in the trade fight. However, behind the scenes, Chinese leaders began to realize that these extreme tariffs were also hurting their own economy. On April 30th, it was revealed that China had quietly created a secret list of U.S. goods that would be spared from the steep tariffs. Companies in cities like Shanghai and Xiamen were contacted directly to confirm which products should be exempt. The government also asked businesses for suggestions on which other American imports are essential and should be excluded. This strategy helps China protect key industries, like computer chips, medicine, and aviation, from rising costs, while still maintaining a tough public stance in the ongoing trade dispute with the U.S. The need for China to ease some of its tariffs is becoming more urgent as signs of economic trouble grow. In April, China's official manufacturing index, a key measure of factory activity, fell to 49.0, its lowest level since December 2023. Any number below 50 means the sector is shrinking. A separate private survey, known as the Caixin Index, showed only slight growth, slipping to 50.4, the slowest pace in almost a year. New export orders dropped sharply, showing that demand from overseas, especially the U.S., is weakening due to the rising tariffs. Meanwhile, other parts of China's economy, like services and construction, are barely growing, highlighting deeper strains. The slowdown isn't limited to China. Global shipping numbers showed just how far the effects are spreading. A key index that tracks global container traffic predicts a 1% drop in shipping volumes for 2025, the third time that's happened since 1979. If tariffs on Chinese goods continue, U.S. imports from China could fall by as much as 40%. At the Port of Los Angeles, which is the busiest in the U.S., officials expect shipments from Asia to plunge by 35% in the weeks after the latest round of tariffs. This major decline could disrupt global supply chains, drive up shipping costs, and make it harder for businesses to keep their shelves stocked. In the U.S., both businesses and everyday consumers are feeling the impact of the trade war. During the first 3 months of 2025, the U.S. economy shrank slightly, by 0.3% on an annual basis, the first time that's happened in 3 years. A big reason was that companies rushed to import goods before new tariffs kicked in, creating a flood of stockpiled imports that actually dragged down overall growth. At the same time, the U.S. trade deficit, the gap between what the country imports and exports, hit a record high in March as businesses continued buying cheaper foreign materials despite the looming tariffs. American consumers are also growing more worried. In April, a major measure of consumer confidence dropped to its lowest point since the early days of the pandemic, in May 2020. People are increasingly anxious about rising prices and the general uncertainty surrounding the economy. Financial markets have reacted with mixed feelings. On April 29th, European stock markets climbed for the 6th day in a row, and the UK's main index, the FTSE 100, posted a 12-day winning streak. This optimism was partly due to reports that China might be easing up on some U.S. imports, hinting at a possible cooling of trade tensions. In the U.S., the S&P 500 rose to its highest level in nearly 3 weeks, and a key measure of market fear, the VYX, fell below 24 for the first time since the major tariffs were announced. Still, experts warn that unless the U.S. and China make real progress in negotiations, these gains may not last. China's decision to offer tariff exemptions through a private whitelist sends a clear message to the U.S. It is still open to talks, if those talks are based on mutual respect and include key issues like technology sharing, intellectual property rights, and access to each other's markets. President Trump has voiced hope that a fair deal with China can still be reached, and U.S. officials, including Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, have noted that China's selective easing of tariffs might lay the groundwork for future compromises. However, Chinese leaders have made it clear that real progress can only happen if top leaders from both countries, Xi Jinping and the U.S. president, get involved directly, without what they call extreme pressure tactics. The trade war is also raising bigger questions about how the global trading system operates. China's decision to limit exports of rare earth minerals, critical materials used in electric cars, defense systems, and electronics, is a powerful example of how countries are now using tools beyond tariffs to protect their interests. While these kinds of export controls are often justified as national security measures, they also make other countries nervous and encourage them to find new suppliers, possibly moving away from Chinese sources altogether. This complicates how international trade rules are enforced, especially under the World Trade Organization, WTO, and highlights a shift in how trade disputes are fought today, where economics, politics, and global power struggles are increasingly intertwined. Looking ahead, tensions between the U.S. and China remain high, and the path to resolving the trade dispute is far from clear. In Washington, political pressure from Republican lawmakers pushing for a tough stance on China limits how much room U.S. leaders have to make concessions. At the same time, China's government faces strong nationalist expectations at home, which also make it difficult to back down publicly. Whether China's whitelist strategy, quietly removing tariffs on certain U.S. goods, leads to progress depends largely on how the U.S. responds. If Washington doesn't offer its own tariff relief or exclusions in return, both countries could continue this cycle of tit-for-tat measures, keeping businesses and markets in a state of uncertainty. There are a few upcoming chances for meaningful dialogue, including G20 meetings and the possibility of a summit between the U.S. and Chinese presidents. But even with these opportunities, finding a lasting solution will require both countries to take political risks and make compromises, something neither side seems fully ready to do just yet. In the end, China's quiet move to ease tariffs on certain U.S. goods reflects a careful shift in its approach to an increasingly tense trade conflict. By giving critical industries like tech and medicine some relief, China hopes to keep its economy steady while still holding firm in negotiations with the U.S. Meanwhile, a bounce in global stock markets suggests that investors are hopeful the worst of the trade fight may be behind us. But the deeper issues, like disagreements over trade rules, industrial policy, and economic independence, are far from settled. The real challenge now is whether the U.S. and China can move past the back and forth of tariffs and retaliation to reach a lasting deal. A true resolution would need to fix long-standing problems, restore confidence in global supply chains, and respect international trade rules, without either country doing long-term harm to its own economy. For leaders on both sides, the time has come to put politics aside and prioritize meaningful dialogue. And for the public, businesses, and international institutions, this is a moment to push for transparency, cooperation, and sustainable trade practices. The world's two largest economies have a responsibility not just to their own citizens, but to the stability of the global economy. Do you think the US and China will reach a fair deal anytime soon? Let's talk about it in the comments. If you found this breakdown helpful, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update that matters.